Hey everyone, James Wilson here with MTB Strength Training Systems and BikeJames.com, and today I'm going to share the difference between doing a good hip hinge and just tipping over, and why this makes a big difference on how you're going to move on the bike, because how you move off the bike is definitely going to affect how you move on the bike, and so knowing how to do this properly is going to help you out a lot. So what are we talking about, right? What is a hip hinge? Right here you have a place where you fold. This is your hips, okay? So if I fold at my hips and I don't bend at my lower back, then I am doing what we call a hip hinge. If I'm bending at my lower back and my hips, then that's no good. So when people are talking about lift with your lower back, lift with your lower back, lift with your legs and not your lower back, what they're talking about is doing a good hip hinge, where you're using your hips to drive your movement and you're using your lower back to stabilize. Now this is how you create good, strong, powerful lower body movement while keeping your lower back protected. This is also how we move a lot on our bikes. You have two types of movement, two spectrums, right? You've got your hip hinge, which we're talking about here, and then you have your squat, where I bend my knees and I drop my butt down towards my heels. Now, we don't do a lot of squatting on the bike. We do some, but a lot of the movement that we do on the bike is actually like this, right? We're doing a hip hinge, right? The bottom of our hip hinge is, the attack position that people talk about on the bike. So you moving from a tall position to a low attack position is the hip hinge. That's the movement pattern that you're using to create that movement on the bike. And so that's why we do hip hinge, exercises like deadlifts and things like that in the gym, because it helps train that movement pattern, which is going to help you on the bike. But again, like I said, there's a difference between doing a good hip hinge and just tipping over. Now, the difference is a good hip hinge, I'm going to stay balanced on my feet. That is just kind of a classic thing of all good athletic movement, is having a balanced foot position to start and end from, right? There are some things where you'll push through the ball of the foot, but if you look at all athletic movement, it starts and ends from a balanced foot position. So your ability to move and not create unwanted weight shifts is very important, right? So when we're doing a hip hinge in the gym or we're moving on our bike, what we want to do is push our butt back, right? So what you'll notice is that my shoulders stay over my feet. So my butt pushes back while my shoulders stay over my feet. You'll notice that my weight stays pretty even on my feet. It may shift a little bit back towards my heels, but I don't want to shift it too much back there. And then as I come up, same thing, I want to stay balanced on my feet as I come up. So this is a good hip hinge, and it's the thing that I look for when watching people do this is what is happening at their feet. Are they staying balanced on their feet? So what I see a lot of is people who tip over, right? So they're not pushing their butt back, they're bending over like this. And so they come down and you can see two things. One, notice where my shoulders are. Now I'm in front of my feet. And you'll notice that my feet are really struggling to keep some weight back. A bunch of my weight has shifted to my toes. This is an unbalanced position. I'm not able to use my hips effectively. If I don't have the back end of my arch loaded, I'm not going to be able to use my hips effectively. So this is unloading the back end of the arch. It's putting a lot of strain on the knees. It's not a strong, balanced position to move from. But you see a lot of this where people will tip over when they think they're doing their deadlifts. They're doing their kettlebell swings, and you'll see this. Again, if you watch where their shoulders are in relation to their feet, a good hinge is going to have the shoulders dropping down with the butt moving back. A tipping forward, the butt kind of stays over the feet and the shoulders tip forward. And again, very different movement. It can look that way, look very similar to the untrained eye, but when you watch people's feet and see if they're staying balanced on their feet, you'll see what's really going on there. Now, why does this matter? One, in the gym, you're going to get better results. You're going to have less risk of injury if you're doing a good hip hinge. But on the bike, it's really important because you want to be able to move without creating unwanted weight shifts. So if I move from a tall position down into a low attack position, I want to do that and stay balanced on my feet. Remember, like a good indicator of a good hip hinge is staying balanced on your feet. So this is one reason why being on the balls of your feet actually makes it harder for you to move in an athletic fashion on your bike. Remember, there are some movements where you end up on the ball of your foot, but all athletic movement, whether you're talking about running, jumping, Olympic lifting, any of these analogies that people like to throw out as why, athletic movement that takes place on the ball of the foot, any of these sports or activities actually start from a balanced foot position. And you see a lot of sports and activities, things like skateboarding, snowboarding, surfing, skiing, right? Like these athletes actually maintain a balanced foot position, and so they don't ever come up all the way on the ball of their foot. So some athletic movement does take place on the ball of the foot, but all athletic movement starts and ends with some weight and some pressure on the back end of the arch as well. And so again, you don't have to have all the weight back there, right? I can have weight towards the ball of my foot, but when you're moving on your bike, if you have all of your weight on your toes already, on the ball of your foot, because you have no pressure under your heels, as you go to do a hip hinge, you're going to be forced to tip over. It's very hard to shift your hips back if you don't have something under your heels to put pressure on. And so you end up tipping over. Well, what does this do? This creates an unbalanced position on the bike. Your toes are pointed forward, so you want to fall forward. Your weight is too far forward, so it's an unbalanced position on your bike. Now, the cure for this, what people tell you to do is to drop your heels, right? Well, why do you drop your heels? You're in an unbalanced position. If I drop my heels, well, that's going to shift it back, right? So I'm not actually getting weight under my heels. I'm not actually getting any pressure under the back end of my arch. I'm just taking an unbalanced foot position from one extreme to unbalanced in the other extreme. And so, but that extreme pushes my hips back into a hip hinge position. And so you can see if a good hip hinge requires a balanced foot position to move from, then you need that on the bike as well, right? And again, maybe you roll some of the weight from the back to the front, but you don't want to have just being on your toes. This is a terrible position to do a hip hinge from. You wouldn't do this in the gym, right? So why would you do it on your bike? It makes no sense. It's not an athletic position to move from. It's actually a very unbalanced position to move from. And so by applying this both in the gym and work on making sure that you're doing a hip hinge, like the advice I give people is think about there's a button on the wall behind you, and you're gonna push your butt to try to push that button, right? If I'm pushing my butt back towards that button on the wall, then I'm doing a good hip hinge. If my butt isn't moving back towards the wall, then I'm doing a tipping motion, right? I'm like that tipping bird that you just get set up, right? So anyways, you don't want to be that tipping bird. You want to be doing a good hip hinge, which requires a balanced foot position both on and off the bike. So watch what's happening at your feet. You want to make sure that you've got weight on your big toe knuckle, your little toe knuckle, and the back end of your arch. That's that triangle of pressure that your foot needs to move from and create good, balanced, strong athletic movement from. And so if you are practicing that in the gym when you're doing your hinges, you're making sure you're keeping that pressure, you're not letting the weight shift too much back, you're not letting the weight shift too much forward, then you make sure you're doing a good hip hinge. And then you can get on the bike and you can apply that same thing. But you gotta make sure that you got your foot in the right position, which, shameless plug, is why I created the Catalyst pedal. Because the Catalyst pedal is the only pedal that supports all three of those pressure points, the big toe knuckle, little toe knuckle, and the back end of the arch, that gives you that balanced foot position to initiate a good athletic movement from. And it is a rotating platform, so you can shift weight back and forth without creating an overly unbalanced foot by committing all the weight one way or the other, right? You have a way to, like a volume knob, right? Like it's not all this way or all this way. You can put a little weight here, put a little weight there, which is more how you move in real life. If you were like surfing, skateboarding, things like that, they all use that good balanced foot position, but it's like, where's the weight, right? A little more weight on the heels, a little more weight on the front, right? They use those weight shifts at their feet to help drive the bike. But if you don't have that ability, then you can't drive the bike. So anyways, work on your hip hinge, apply this stuff to your bike, but it all starts with your feet, right? You gotta have balanced feet if you wanna have balanced athletic movement. So make sure you apply this in the gym and on your bike, and I'll talk to everybody next time.